Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Alexa Developer Office Hours. Whoa, 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 not that. We don't need an echo in here. I want to welcome all of you. We, as we do here every week. Oh, my goodness. I have so many. Oh, goodness. Too many computers with too many microphones and speakers. That's just how it goes sometimes. Anyway, my name is Jeff Blankenburg. I want to welcome all of you here. We're here to answer your questions about Alexa skill development. So if you have anything that you'd like to ask, we are here to do and so. In fact, I have a guest with me today, which is always nice. I have Alicia. Alicia, welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me.
I'm glad to have you here. So the two of us are going to kind of tag team on questions today, and we'll see what kind of questions come in from our audience about things that are going on with skill development. We have a bunch of people saying hello so far from India. We have TradeLast and Phelpsync.net, Joel Farvel from France. A bunch of great folks have popped in just to say hi. Oxygen Box is here. This is pretty common. We have a bunch of people that join in. We have a nice community. And something I should actually mention to folks is if you're looking for conversations, if you're looking for ways to get your questions asked or answered during the week when we're not live here on Office Hours, there is a place you can do this. If I give you this URL, and I'll even put it up on the screen here, like so. This is a Slack server. You can go and you can jump into the Slack. There are a number of other skill developers there, and it's amazing to me how much they help each other. If you have a question, if you're not sure how something works, or you're just looking for some advice or guidance or beta testers or whatever it might be, it's a fantastic place to go and chat with other people that are also working on skill development. Now, that being said, I'm there. Alicia, have you gotten into the Slack yet?
Not yet, no.
No, that's quite all right. But we're having a lot of folks from Amazon join in there as well so that we can talk with you and potentially answer some of your questions. When it comes to looking for real support, though, we actually need specific problems solved for your specific cases. That's where folks like Alicia and her team come in, because we have our standard Contact Us forums. We have the forums that people can go to make their requests. And those things funnel to folks like Alicia. So I'm glad that you can be here to kind of help out and answer some of those questions as people have them today.
Yeah, sounds great. I'm excited to see what questions people have.
Me too. All right, so it looks like TradeLast is saying, I'm not an expert, but I've developed an unpublished skill using Alexa entities during the developer preview, and it can help out in the Slack channel, the Alexa entities in the Alexa community. Oh, that's fantastic, TradeLast. Thank you. So he's sharing that the new Alexa entities feature, which was launched last week, he's already built some stuff with it, and he's willing to jump in the Slack channel and talk about it if anybody has any questions. So that's fantastic. Thank you, TradeLast. So no official questions yet, which is just fine. One of the other things that I like to mention as we get into these office hours is that this is just an opportunity to come and chat about stuff. So if you have questions, if you have specific needs, we are more than happy to answer them. But that Slack community is really growing. It's amazing to me the number of people that jump in there every day just to chat and talk and share things and get advice. So if you're into this, if you're into building skills, if you're into engaging in this awesome community, I can't recommend enough checking out that Slack. All right, so usually this is about the time someone pops a question on me. I'm ready for them. If you guys have any questions that you would like me or Alicia to answer, I'm happy to do so at this time. Let's see if I can put our display names on there. There we go. If you would like, Alicia, if you have additional information you want to put on here, I think you can do that in your settings. Like okay. The little screenshot of your video, there's a little 3-dot button. I think you can change your name if you want to add more to it, like a handle or something.
Okay, sounds good.
So while we're waiting for questions to come in, let me see if I have one here. Let me ask you this, Alicia. We'll get the conversation rolling between you and I. When you, in your day-to-day, are encountering all sorts of support tickets and things like that, what are some of the common themes that you generally see that developers run into?
One major one that I see pretty often is like after a skill is freshly live, of course, people are excited to see their skill in the skill store. and enable it on their Alexa devices. But it can take some time for skill ingestion to happen. So occasionally it'll take a little bit for it to show up on the Alexa app in the store. So if you don't see it right away after it's been published, then sometimes you have to wait a little bit for it to show up there to be able to enable it.
Got it. So that's a support request you get quite often, is they got the email saying their skill is live, but it's not in the store yet and they're concerned something's wrong.
Yeah, yep. And it just takes a little bit for it to adjust. So
yeah. What's the usual amount of time that takes?
Usually a couple of hours.
Okay.
Yeah, so not too long. It shouldn't take more than a day. So if it does for some reason, then feel free definitely to reach out to us and ask if
that's good advice.
wrong. Yeah.
So if you're worried about a few minutes or a few hours, maybe that's not something to escalate. But if it's more than a day, that's where concerns start to come in. That's good.
Yeah.
That's the Alexa Dev equivalent of a New York minute, Laldi Lab says. That's funny. So Startup is asking about an Alexa quiz skill using APL. So Startup, I don't know if you're referring to the skill that I've been building. So a little backstory, Alicia. I stream live Alexa development almost every single day. So I do it on my own personal channel, but I already did 2 hours this morning where I was working on some ISP stuff. I offered a subscription yesterday. That was what we built. And today I went in and I finalized all the stuff for like canceling a subscription with your voice and some of those other bits and pieces that you have to be able to handle in order to publish an ISP skill. And so the entire skill is a big trivia game. Hundreds and hundreds of questions, 20 different categories, lots of like daily games and achievements and all sorts of stuff. But in that, one of the things I haven't worked on at all yet is the APL side of it, where I'm actually showing the questions on the screen and showing the answers afterward. And I have nice, rich visuals that I'll show for most of the questions when you get them right or wrong. Like it's some visual information about what you needed to know about that question, right? So I think that's what Startup is referring to is, hey, are we going to spend any time on the APL for your trivia game? And in this stream, we're not, but I will be working on APL tomorrow morning on my stream. So if you guys would like to join me there, feel free. You can find me on Twitch at the same name that you see here on the screen, Jeff Blankenburg. So we'd be happy to share that with all of you. Traylast has a tip. I failed certification with the skill does not respond to one or more launch requests from Alexa. It turns out the default Lambda timeout of 3 seconds wasn't sufficient. I launched with a request to an external API, but I never ran into it in testing. Bumping it up to 8 seconds solved it. Interesting. So you're talking about the actual Lambda timeout of not being willing to wait for a longer call. That seems like a good piece of advice to be able to bump that up to 8 seconds, because that's about the length of the response you could have anyway. Is that something that we see often on the support side, Alicia? Is the idea of just making small tweaks to like Lambda timeouts to solve some problems?
Occasionally, not a whole lot, but yeah.
Got
occasionally we get questions like that. Mm-hmm.
All right. So Winston Thompson asks, I have a device that I put Alexa on using the device SDK. Is there anything to enable Amazon Music streaming? I don't know the answer to this question, but I do know that a lot of the kind of homemade hobbyist devices that we can make, like I've made a Raspberry Pi that has this running on it. It wasn't able to play streaming music. Do you have any knowledge or experience around this, Alicia?
There is, if you write into our contact us page, we can take a look and see if that's something like a resource that we can grant. Most of the time for Raspberry Pis, it's not something that we, like a resource that we can allow or grant. But if you write into us, we can take a look and pass your information along to the appropriate internal team and then see if we can enable music streaming for you on your device.
Got it. All right. I just added this link to the chat. So that's a link to the contact us form if people would like to do that. So Winston mentioned he also has a Raspberry Pi, but I think what you're referring to might just be something that you need to reach out to our support team, and maybe that's something that they can handle for you. So I provided a link there in the chat. I'll throw it up here on the screen. Looks like that, alexa.design/contact us. And hopefully that'll get you headed in the direction you want to go. We're going to come back to this startup. You have a question about calling many small skills from one main skill. So we'll jump on that here in just a moment. Jay McClure says, I'm seeing audio-only response in the test console when I use utterances that aren't in my model. It's not even hitting my endpoint, though. Interesting. There's about 1,000 reasons why that could be. To lean on you again, Alicia, do you have any insight or guidance on what the common reasons for that are?
Not that I can think of off the top of my head, but there is a great blog for it that I can see if I can find and link to here.
Oh, that'd be excellent.
Yeah. Let's see if I can find it real quick.
All right, I'm gonna dig into something too here while we wait. Apologize now for my noisy keyboard. Okay, so what I wanted to grab is this. And we'll come back to StreamYard. So I don't have any specific guidance for startup. He was asking about, let me read his specific words. Calling many small skills from one main skill. So what you're referring to is Alexa skill connections. And Alexa skill connections is a way for you to call one skill from another skill. So I'm going to provide a link to that first here in the chat. And then as we talk about specifically, here, I'll bring this onto my screen. We're going to try and get fancy here. No, we're not. That's when it screws up my camera. Let me see if, Alicia, I'm going to bump you from the screen for just a second.
Okay.
And we'll do this. There we go. So this is my browser. This is skill connections. And so you can see that there's two different ways that you can manage a skill connection. The first is called managed. And this is where you request a predefined task from Alexa, something that Alexa already does, or a direct skill connection. And this is where, as you request it, you tell it very specifically where you want to go. So this is where I would recommend you check it out, understanding skill connections, and it follows you through to using them and walking you through that entire process. But this is where I would recommend taking a look. Start up. Okay, and we are back. All right, so let's see, I missed something. Benjamin said, I'm hosting an endpoint for my skill, the Echo Show devices which sit on the same LAN as, let's see, I'm hosting an endpoint for my skill. The Echo Show devices, which sit on the same network as the service, are unable to access images through HTTPS beyond APL 1.1. What to do? Well, I don't know that that has anything specifically to do with your network. Oh, you have no HTTPS on an internal LAN. I see. What to do? I guess my number one would be move those devices outside of that corporate LAN, or I'm guessing corporate, but that internal LAN that is blocking all of that HTTPS. But I don't know that I have a better piece of advice for you than that. There's nothing we can do with the devices, and the service itself is probably serving that content up. It's just not able to get it back into the device. So that would be my initial guess. I don't have a great piece of advice for you on that one, though. Alicia, any thoughts? No?
Yeah, I'm not sure on that one either.
So Stephen Brown is referring to the most common error message you will ever hear. There's a problem with the requested skills response. What is the best way to look, or the first place I should look to resolve this? I actually have some good advice for you on this. Let me share my screen again. And I'll open up a file. Here, let's do this. And Alicia, we can still hear you. We just can't see you for a second.
Okay.
Okay, so in this file, I have an error handler. Now, my files are broken up a little bit differently, but this is basically what the code looks like. If we take this, just bump up my font size a little bit so you guys can read this well. You can see that the first thing that I do in my error handler is I log out. Well, first of all, error comes into your error handler. And then I have error.stack that I specifically dump out to my logs. So anytime that I get an error, I automatically log whatever that issue happened to be. And because of that, I can very easily jump into my logs and see exactly what's going wrong. So my recommendation number one, the default template that you would use for most skills only logs out error. So it would remove this piece. It does this. And this does not give you the stack. So you specifically have to say .stack. And this will give you the line number, the error type, all of that stuff. And then I log that to my logs, and I can jump back in and very easily figure out what was going wrong. And let me see if I don't have any of those error messages right now, I don't think. Oh, I do maybe. Let's see if I have, no. These are some messages I got earlier. I was looking to see if I had any errors, but I don't even think I have any errors right now. A good skill shouldn't have a ton of errors, right? And this thing that I'm working on, but this is what the logging would look like. So in here, I can't look at it because I'm not actually running the debugger. But this is how I dig through my logging. Now I do it here with local debugging, but you could just as easily see how all of this stuff works directly in your CloudWatch logs or whatever. But error.stack is, so if you're in JavaScript, make sure you're grabbing the stack. That's the important piece. All right, let's close that down. Don't save. And get rid of that. And get rid of that. And bring Alicia back. Okay. There we go. All right, so let's see what else we've got here. This is back to Jay McClure, who was the one asking about the fallback intent. I do have fallback intent on. Fallback intent could be catching a lot of your responses that are out of your model. That's specifically what fallback intent is designed for. So if you're not familiar or comfortable with what fallback intent does, you can turn it off. It's not required, but that might be a solution to your problem as well. Have you checked the device log in the simulator? Sometimes that gives a clue when you're not hitting your endpoint. That's another good piece of advice from Trey Last. Laldi Labs wants to know if Skill Connections is out of preview yet. I registered months ago and never heard back. I'd love to use it. I don't actually know the answer to that question. Let's see. Yeah, they're in developer preview. You must still register. So yes, they are still in developer preview. And my apologies for that. I know we've had this out a little while, but it's still something that they're tweaking and working on. So my recommendation might be, though, to try and resubmit and actually, this might be a good question for you, Alicia. When developers submit to something like this, like they want to register for Skill Connections to be able to try these features out, and they wait months and they don't hear anything back, is there anything that they can do? Is there a way they can reach out through you and like try to bump that a little bit and just say, hey, is there any chance I can still get in on this? I really want to use this feature.
I mean, we can try to write into the internal team that kind of owns the feature, but typically they'll reach out to them specifically, to a developer, or we'll, add them to the preview as like basically a push instead of us, trying to internally ask. Just
for a little transparency, the way this works is when they create those registration forms, what they're really doing is looking for specific types of businesses and skills and use cases. And so then they pick a few of them that make sense for them to get through their preview until they can roll it out to beta or something like that. So don't take it personally if you're not selected, and they're not ignoring you. It's just that they only need a small handful of people as they continue to work with this stuff. So hopefully that answers all of your questions about that. Data-Driven Skills asks, is there any reason I would write my own interface to DynamoDB instead of using the persistence layer in Alexa SDK? I have found in my own experience that using the persistence layer in the Alexa SDK is very good. It does a lot of things very well, but it does all of it in the context of specifically user data. So one of the challenges that I've had with DynamoDB is if you imagine, I'm going to go back to my trivia game example. I have thousands of questions, and I want to be able to refine the analytics around all of that data so that every time a question is asked, I know which user asked it or was asked it, and then what their answer was. Did they get it right? And if they didn't get it right, be able to aggregate and collect all of the wrong answers and validate those against what the right answer actually was to make sure that I'm not, telling people they're wrong when they were actually correct. And also not telling them they're correct when they're not right. So this is something that I've spent a lot of time thinking about. And when I think about the persistence adapter and when I think about how we treat all of that, it is all data that is very specifically in the context of the user. You are saving a user object every single time using that persistence adapter. And if you want to do something that's a little outside of that, the bounds of that, you're going to find yourself writing custom queries against Dynamo, which is okay, because there are a lot of times where you do want to be able to do that stuff. But my experience, and again, I haven't played with it probably in almost a year, but my experience has been that persistence layer has its limitations, but is really good at what it does for most cases. Okay, let's see what else we have here. Backjito says, here's the blog post I mentioned. I'll just show this on the screen really quick. It's a long URL, so you're probably not going to click on that there, but you can find that in the comments and click on their link. I have a problem where, okay, this is from Alexa. So I have a problem where I created an alphanumeric slot, and sometimes Alexa doesn't repeat the alphanumeric values correctly. Also, sometimes with a space in the values. How can I fix this? Or what about an alphanumeric custom slot? Alexa, what I'd love to see you share with me here, and the questions continue to pour in. This is fantastic. Give me a very concrete example of what you're saying, what the skill is expecting, and how you're trying to respond with that information. That will help me have a better context around what you're trying to do, but I think we can probably help here. TradeLast says, in the developer forum, it seems like similar reported problems are a result of an invocation error. Oh, he's back to the guy that's using the fallback intent, which is probably the likely cause of those audio-only responses. Laldi Labs says, does my use case have to be especially interesting to be accepted for preview? I think I answered that, and he thinks that I did. That's good. Jay McClure, the skill works fine as long as I use utterances in the model. It only breaks when I use non-model utterances. I think what you're experiencing is the fallback intent. It also feels to me like maybe you haven't written any code to handle that fallback intent, in which case that would ultimately result in an error or a sound. What's your experience, Alicia, with the fallback intent? Is that something that you see cause problems for developers like this?
I haven't seen many cases about it, although I'm sure on our tech team there have been more questions about that. So I don't have a lot of insight necessarily from
that's okay.
the side, but
okay, no, that's good to know. Okay. The device log says abandoning no expressed intent. So it's quitting the skill as a result of the fallback intent, I would guess, because it couldn't match it to anything that was even remotely close inside your skill. So hopefully that is heading you down the right path. If that's the device log error, I can't copy this. Abandoning, let's see if I can get it here. Abandoning no expressed intent. Let's see if we drop that in a little search, what we find. There's only one record. Wow, that's hard to do, to get one search result from Google. Is there anything more in here I can use? Sorry, I'm digging and I'm not finding a whole lot. But it looks like someone named the Stranded Starfish replied to a very specific problem like this in 2018. And it's exactly that. The audio-only message means that Alexa wasn't able to match what it heard what you have in your interaction model. And so that error message specifically is letting the user know that, like, hey, I just quit that skill because you're trying to do stuff that's way outside the bounds of what I'm trying to accomplish here. So that's what I'm seeing here. Now, again, this is from our forums from 2018. Here, I'll drop this in the chat in case if you have any thoughts on this, Alicia. I'll put it in a private chat too so you can get it easily. Okay, I'm going to keep moving, but if you have any additional thoughts on that specific issue, that would be awesome. So Lolly Lab says, that's what I found too. The persistence layer, we're talking about the persistence layer for DynamoDB. It makes it easy to save per user record, but it's a blob. And if you want to run your own analytics or calculations, you'll end up using scan, not query, which can be expensive. Totally agree, Lolly. That's exactly what I found. I applied for Entities Developer Preview based on experience using Wikidata entities for similar functionality. I applied to others, but this is the one where I got in. Very cool, TradeLast. I'm happy that you got into one of those. All right, let's see. Where did it go? Lolly Lab says, to clarify, by blob, I mean in the database, you get the user ID and a single JSON object, not columns. Yes, Lolly, you're nailing my issue completely, but it sounds like Data-Driven Skills has the answers they need now, so that's good. Tom Bustamante says, my skills now start off with account name, now handing over to skill name. This only started in the last couple of weeks. Do you know, I've noticed this as well, Alicia, and I don't know if you have any insight into this, but I do find that sometimes when I ask for a skill to start, even one that I've had enabled for a long time, it will say something like, all right, now I'm handing it off to this skill. Do you have any insights into why that specifically happens?
I think it's sort of a newer feature. Basically, it's trying to give developers more insight and transparency into what's happening. So that way they know when they're being connected to a skill and who is by occasionally. So yeah, it's basically just for transparency for customers of your skill.
Got it. So it knows it's being handed off to a different experience, basically.
Exactly.
Is it a permanent thing? Is it something that happens only occasionally? Do you know anything about the specifics on that?
I don't know a lot of specifics on it. I know that it's not for every skill.
Okay.
But if you have questions about it too, you can always reach out to us and we can take a look into it. Got it.
Okay. So Tom, that's the answer. This is something that we're trying to do, and this plays into all of our name-free invocation and all that other stuff. We want people to know where they are and where they're going, and so this kind of mechanism. I mean, I've seen it, and I have some insights into why it happens, but it's generally to let you know, like, hey, you're leaving the first-party Alexa experience and you're going over to this other thing that someone created. In the same way that when you open an app, you leave your home screen of your phone and you jump into the app. It's the same kind of idea. It's just that we have rich visuals on our phones, and we don't have that with voice. TradeLast says, it sounds like you need a fallback intent handler, not just enabling fallback intent in the model. That is 100% right, TradeLast. That's kind of where I was leaning as well, so I'm glad to know that. Robinson Leberdette wants to know, is it possible to have more than 250 intents in a skill? I don't know if you know the answer to that off the top of your head. I'm going to let you think about it for just a second, because there's something about a model that has 250 intents that smells weird to me. If you guys have ever heard that term, a code smell. Robinson, I'd love to know more about why you have 250 intents and how we can maybe help you solve that problem first, rather than talk about the limit that may or may not be there. I didn't realize there was a limit. Do you know, Alicia?
Yeah, as far as I know, that's the hard limit on it.
Okay. So I would love to talk more, Robinson, and I'm happy to do it here on the stream. But I would love to know more about why you have 250 intents and how we can help you fix that. All right, Danny Costello here. This is my first time making office hours. Question about APL for audio. Is it possible when layering tracks to have a background track end when Alexa stops speaking, or will it always play out? Yeah, my understanding, and again, I'm not well-versed in APLA, but my understanding is that the background track audio is meant to be exactly that, a background track. I believe that you can provide individual utterance background sounds. So like if you wanted birds to be tweeting only while someone is speaking, I think that's still a possibility, although I don't want to overstep my knowledge here because I don't know for sure. But I do know that the standard background track is not something that goes away. It's meant to be played the whole time. So hopefully that answers your specific question. All right, Justin Kim. I'm a new developer trying to make my first Alexa skill. I want my Alexa skill to take integer inputs and calculate them using an equation. What steps would you recommend for doing this? So, Justin, here's my recommendation on this. You mentioned this earlier, I think. You were the one talking about this earlier, I think. And I asked you to clarify, maybe. Totally lost whatever other comment there might have been. You're on YouTube. Let me see if that makes it easier. Well, I mean, I have an answer for you on this, but I want to make sure that I was trying to find your original question and I'm not finding it. Okay. So you want to be able to collect integers from a user and then do some kind of mathematical calculation on that. So the way that I would recommend doing this is that you have a intent that is like the number intent or something like that. And inside there you have a slot, and that slot type is Amazon.number. Amazon.number will allow you to let the user say things like 4 or 97 or 162. And it will catch that. And not only does it catch that number, it delivers to you the numeric version of that number, not the speech version of that number. In fact, we could probably even build this here really quickly if we wanted to show this. Yeah, let's do that. Back to screen sharing. So if we look at screen sharing, I'm just going to create a new skill really quickly. No, I don't want to create a new skill because that takes time. Let's go back to like this one. That's fine. This is a skill that already exists. I'm going to come in my interaction model. And in here, I have a couple of basic intents. I'm going to add a new one called a number intent. Number intent, like that. And we'll just have a slot called number. Wow. Okay. And we're going to create that slot. And then down here, we have to choose a slot type. So this is where I'm going to choose Amazon.number, this property right here. And I'm going to save it. And we'll build it. And then I'm going to show you how I can test this pretty quickly without writing any code or anything. So while that's building, we're going to come over to evaluate model. And we're going to try something like 7. You can see here that I'm hitting my number intent. Let me blow this up a little bit for you. So you can see that when I say 7, it hits my number intent, and the slot value that I got was 7. So just by setting up that simple intent with one simple slot that's just the Amazon.number type, we're able to collect numbers from our user. So hopefully, I want to get back to where your question was, Justin. Hopefully that answers your question. This is a nice, simple way to manage that. I can also say 194. You can see that the same kind of thing comes through. So this is what I would recommend. And if you guys aren't using this tool, by the way, this is a really powerful way to make sure that your skill is doing what you expect it to do. This NLU evaluation is something that I use all the time. And to do this, you create a simple annotation set. If you guys haven't seen this, it's awesome. But we'll do numbers just as an example of a thing. And I'm going to say 17. That's going to be my value that I pass in. I'm going to now predict, like I'm creating unit tests, I'm going to predict what I think the value should be. So I think it should hit my number intent. I think that the expected slot should be filled in as number. And I would expect the value for this to be 17. I could do another one that's 984. And same idea, right? I'll choose number intent. I'll choose number, and I'll say 984. And then I can save this set. I can come back to here, and I can say, no, I want to run that numbers test. I'm going to run an evaluation. This takes maybe 30 seconds for something this small. And what this is going to show me is, do the things that I expect actually happen? So this tool allows me to basically build out a set of utterance unit tests and say, when this is said, this is what should happen. And if you build a robust set of those, this can be the first thing you do. You should then be able to run this test and say, oh, it passed. And as you continue to grow your model and add new intents, maybe you're adding 250 intents like Robinson is, this allows you to very quickly run a test and say, oh, good, everything's still working the way I expect. I didn't like blow anything up. I didn't create any new errors because of it. So I love this NLU evaluation tool. If you like ASR evaluation, you can also create recordings of your voice and send those through too, just like the same kind of tests. So anyway, that's a long way of answering your question, but I wanted to make sure I shared that. All right, back to us. Let's see what else we've got here. Let's see. Data-driven skills says, on that background sound question, they just released a new feature that trims sounds to speeches. Checking the Ask Release blog for details. I see. Okay, so we're going to get a little deeper into Robinson's problem now. So we're making an adventure game with about 4 hours of playtime. We were allowing the user to say, I stay hidden instead of option 1. We're reaching the end of the project and we risk hitting 510. So, okay. There are other ways to solve this problem that I think will make your life a little easier. When we think about different utterances and how we want to take action on those things, you could potentially have one intent that is commands, and inside that commands intent, you have a slot that has all sorts of commands in it, like I stay hidden, pick up the torch, whatever the thing might be. Each of those are individual slot values. They can have synonyms so that they can say things that are like the thing, but not exactly the thing. And in those cases, you can also provide an ID. That ID should be some sort of unique identifier that lets you know what should actually happen when they say that thing. And so I've built dozens of examples of things like this, where we're trying to flip things around so that instead all of your commands, your 500 commands or whatever, those are slot values. They're not intents. And by making them all slot values, you could have one intent that's the command intent. All of your slot values are the individual commands that you want the user to be able to use. And then you can use entity resolution, which, if you're not familiar with that, is the opportunity for Alexa to tell you that, hey, they match something that you have in your list. You could use that entity resolution to identify which one they matched and then take the appropriate action. But it feels like, and Robinson, I would be happy to even get on a call with you guys because this sounds cool and interesting. If you want to talk about this or talk about how we can flip that structure around, I think that might make your life a lot easier. But building a separate intent for each command, that will certainly run you out of runway quickly. So I would definitely recommend thinking about how you make those slot values instead. And anything to add to that, Alicia? Any thoughts?
No, I agree. I agree with that. Just because there's no way to increase the limit for intents. So
yeah, and I think ultimately that should provide a lot less code for them too, right? Because they don't have to write a separate handler for each intent and all that stuff now. Now you can build something that just says, oh, well, here's the command that they gave me, go do the thing. I don't have to write a different handler for every single intent that I have. Hopefully that helps, Robinson. Let me know. Let me know your thoughts on that. Lolly Labs, is that tool dev time only, Jeff, or does it influence the runtime model? Oh, okay. Is that tool dev? He was talking about the NLU tool. The NLU tool can be used at any time, but it does not look past your interaction model. So it's not looking at all at what happens in your code or the responses that come back or anything. So you can't even chain things together. So that you could say test 1, when the response comes back, test 2. Like, it's not that. You're testing the solid utterance coming right into your skill, and all you're testing is which intent did it hit and which values resolved out of that. It's not testing the step-by-step conversation, if that makes sense. TradeLast says, how do you prevent 984 from returning 984 with multi-value slots? You don't do that easily. If you have multi-value slots and you apply that to an Amazon.number, and is the only delimiter for multi-value slots. And so if you have 984 and you also have 900 and you also have 84, it's going to be a very tricky problem to try to handle those. And there's not necessarily a good way around it. Getting people to give you multiple numbers as a multi-value input is really hard. And if you're asking that, I mean, again, with 984, it's a little trickier. I can get multiple numbers if we're talking about a phone number, right? I could actually just use the phone number slot and say, what's your phone number? And they're like 614-923-1124. And it will hear all of those numbers, assemble them together, and hand you a phone number. But when you're talking about 984, my question is, well, how many different values are they giving you where they're giving you 984 and something else, right? That's where it gets a little confusing to me. And that's where the conversation I think we would need to focus on most specifically. But there isn't a prevention trade last. And OxygenBox makes a good point. On February 25th, which also happens to be my daughter's 17th birthday. I have a 17-year-old, Alicia. That is mind-blowing to me. Although the gray hair does give it away. On that day, I am doing a webinar. It's called an Alexa Tech Talk. And with the Alexa Tech Talks, I'm doing an entire session. It'll probably be about 35 minutes long, entirely covering aspects of multi-value slots. So we're going to talk about some of the things that TradeLast just brought up, how to make sure that you're building things in an appropriate way for multi-value slots to work, but also how to implement them, how to use them, the problems that it solves, all of that stuff packed into about 35 minutes or so. I'll be recording it this week, so I'm looking forward to that. I've written most of the script, pretty excited about it, and I think you could probably go sign up for that at some point. I'd like to interface my database with Alexa. How do I do that? This sounds like someone looking for an easy answer, and
Sorry, I didn't get that.
I know. We're not going to get it. Honey Clover. I'd like to interface my database with Alexa. How do I do that? I have 1,000 questions for you about this. The first one is, what kind of database do you have? I do this all the time with a service called Airtable. This is a database that lives in the cloud. It has an API sitting on top of it, so I can very easily just call in and get the data that I need in and out. But the answer, Honey Clover, to your question is you're going to need a web accessible interface to your database someplace. You're also going to need to write some code that actually can talk to and query your database. But the Alexa skill part of it actually has nothing to do with your database. It really has everything to do with how you get the data out of your database into your code and feed that back to your user. If you want an easy path to creating a skill that just kind of wraps around your data, so you want to be like, well, we have this database and it has customer data or something, something useful in it. I just want to be able to have it know what to say and what to ask. I wish I could say that there was an easy button for you, but there is not. You're going to have to create an API or something that can sit on top of your database, do the lookups, and then build an endpoint to point to it. That's what Benjamin Anderson says here in the chat, and I agree with him. There's a bit of work to it, but it's not impossible. It's actually very doable. But you have to create a skill that has knowledge of your data. You have to build it in a way that people would ask for it, right? It's not just building a voice interface for your API, because most users won't know what your API looks like. They won't know what to look for or ask for. You have to make it easy for them. So yeah, there's definitely some work and some massage that goes into all of this. Lots and lots of questions. Robinson said, we had quickly heard about that approach to go over the intense limit. Thanks for the details. We will definitely use that. Awesome. I'm glad I could be helpful. And Justin says, thank you for answering my question. Very, very helpful. Zell is here. Did somebody say APL? Zella.b is one of our resident community APL experts. APL.ninja is a website, if you're familiar with it. He's put tons and tons of awesome stuff on. Great resource. Justin says, if I want to conduct a calculation with the slots, would I need to write my own code, or can it be done through Intents? So Justin, this is a good opportunity for me to teach a little bit more about how Alexa works. There's two sides to this entire story, in the same way that every application has two sides. The left-hand side, you could think about it as like your web interface, right? So if you're in a browser, everything you see in the browser is the front end. It's HTML, CSS, JavaScript kind of stuff. And it's how you interact with the software. But when you click a button, it sends a message to a server someplace, and the server does all the work, decides what other content needs to show up on the web page, and then sends you another one. Well, the same parallels really work here when we talk about voice. When you say something to the skill, it grabs what you said, and it makes some decisions about what intent the user indicated, any slot values they may have, and it hands that information off the same way a web page does to some code somewhere on a server. And that code somewhere on a server makes some decisions about what should happen, maybe a calculation, packages that all up and passes it back to Alexa and says, hey, here's what you should say. Here's the answer to that calculation. So yes, Justin, you do absolutely have to do this in the back end. The intents itself are only designed to identify what the user wants to do. That's why it's called an intent, what they intend to do. And then once you've gathered that information, you hand it off to a service that makes some decisions and does all the work. And then it passes back another response. So Alexa or Jeff, can you have the time? Can you just create an alphanumeric? Now I saw another question I missed up here. Where, oh my gosh, I missed a bunch. What's the recommended way to request a zip code? I still recommend the Amazon.number for this. That works fine for US zip codes. And as Alexa is mentioning, for other places that have different zip codes, especially ones that have letters like Canada, Australia, there's a bunch of places that have letters in their zip codes. This becomes trickier because now you're expecting them to spell all this stuff out. But I still think that you could have almost any kind of slot value. Let's go back to my example that I had earlier. We'll jump one more time to some screen sharing. And this is the number slot that I built a moment ago. Let's build one more intent because I feel like I've done this before. So we'll call this alpha numeric intent. And in this one, we want to be able to say zip as anything. We'll just call it zip. So I say zip. I need to choose a type. And in our built-in slot types, I think that there is a it's postal address. I thought there was a postal code. There is not. Where can we do this? Which isn't going to blow everything up. Street address and street name, city, state. I don't have zip. So I feel like let's try this with something like number. I'm going to try it with number still. And we'll just see what we get. So save it, build it, and let's go try it. So in this case, we're going to go back to the utterance profiler, and we're just going to say CAT1, 2, 3. And it like none of those. Now I'm still building, so it's possible that that didn't work because of that specific reason. Postal address could potentially be a good solution for this, but I feel like there is a way for me to spell this stuff out because we also have like a, while I'm waiting for this to finish training. Yeah, we don't have like an email address either. I was thinking of something that's just kind of a generic pattern matching data type. So, okay, we're built now. So let's try that again. CAT1, 2, 3. Okay, it didn't like either of those because both of them are expecting a number. So I'm not going to be able to get away with this number. So how would I solve this? Because I feel like I've done this before. Let's try postal address. Save and build. I do, Robinson. If you want to hit me up here, you can reach me there. My inbox is a hot wasteland of garbage, though, so keep that in mind as you reach out to me because if I don't respond, it's not because I don't want to. I'm not ignoring you, but it's very possible that I just missed it. And so be patient with me. Please reach out again if I don't, but I would be more than happy to chat with you about how you might readdress this. I'm really excited about your adventure game. I think that could be pretty cool. Okay, so let's try this one more time before I bring it back to Alicia. Okay, so this does work. So I'm using the street address, not street address, postal address, and this was able to accept my value. When I said CAT123, it was able to capture that as spelling it out. Now, I would imagine that there's a lot of nuance to this, and I think that there's probably other solutions to this as well, but that kind of solution will work because you're expecting them to spell it out. I would expect trickier problems, though, if I just say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it's going to consider that to be the number intent. So this is where having all of those tests work and really make your life easy. Because if I had built the alphanumeric intent first and I tested it and everything was working great, and then later in my skill development, me or someone else adds a number intent, it's automatically going to assume that these now go to the number intent, the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So you'll have to be very careful about that. That's why having those tests provide a set of guardrails that make things a lot safer for you. But in general, if you have alphanumeric characters, it looks like that postal address will work. I should be able to say, like, what if I say Jeff 23? So this still came through as my alphanumeric intent, but this is the one that it picked. So it thought that this was the right place, but then it didn't get a number that it could use. So you're going to see some conflict between these things, and you're going to really want to be conscious about the fact that when you add a new intent with new slot types like this, you can completely upend how everything else was working, because now this is grabbing a bunch of stuff. The worst culprit of all in all of this is the search query slot. It has a ton of what I refer to as gravity. And the moment you introduce that into your skill, everything wants to go there. So anyway, hopefully that helps get you kind of headed in the right direction. Welcome back. All right, so let's see. Honey Clover. Thanks, Ben. I thought that was the way to do this. It's my personal database and just wanted to ask Alexa where my stuff is. I have a small barn converted to a warehouse of stuff. Okay, so I mean, it sounds like you could do this, but you're definitely going to have to write some code to take advantage of this. TradeLast says there's lots of discussion around the forum about zip codes, but not so sure it's all settled yet. Some people report codes beginning with 0, drop to 0, etc. Yeah, I think that there's a lot of challenges in this. I think it was very short-sighted of the Zone Improvement Planning Commission that created this in like 1923 or whatever, to put leading zeros on zip codes, because they couldn't have anticipated computers, but it really breaks a lot of things having leading zeros. So yeah, I think that's all I've got for you. Oh my gosh, we only have 8 minutes left. This has been a good one. I've lost all track of time. Let's see. What else? I think I've answered, or at least addressed, all of the questions that we have here so far. Yeah, I think I have all the questions answered. This is kind of fun. We're broadcasting on both Twitch and YouTube, but the interface that I'm using here, Streamlabs, it aggregates it all into one chat for me, so I can see everything at once. Pretty cool. Lots of good discussion today, though. Do you guys just want us to end 8 minutes early? There's got to be a few more questions, which I would be happy to answer. Did you get buried in snow, Alicia? Where do you live? What city are you in?
Oh, I'm in Fall City. So yeah, we got a decent amount of snow recently. Yeah.
We here in Ohio, we're part of the blizzard that just rolled through yesterday. We were supposed to get 8 to 12 inches of snow. What we got was we got 2 inches of ice. It was just rain and ice and gross, and so everything is just covered in like this thick crust of ice now.
Oh man.
Which is not ideal.
Yeah.
Yeah, Danny, that's why you're seeing other chats. We're on YouTube and Twitch. We have been on Twitch for years, literally years, every Tuesday at this time slot. But we decided to start reaching out to YouTube as well. We thought maybe we'd find a few of you there, and it looks like we have, which is great. And we will continue to be on YouTube going forward. So I'm glad you found us, Danny, and hopefully we'll see you here soon again. Are there any other questions I can answer for folks right now? We're down to about our last 5 minutes. Zella has a question for Alicia. Would it be possible to include the message history in the reply if I use the Contact Us form? That's interesting. So every time they have a correspondence with the Contact Us form, they don't have any context of what was sent the last time or anything like that.
Right. Yeah. We try in our correspondences to reference the previous correspondence. Maybe not put all of the wording in there, but a little bit just to give you context in case you had forgotten what you had written in about, or if you have multiple cases open, to kind of like organize them that way. But that's definitely some good feedback. I think that having a message history in there would be a great option. And I can definitely talk to our internal team and see if that's something we can include in the future.
Cool.
Yeah.
That'd be great. Yeah, we're not here to make any promises, but that's great to look into it. That's great.
Great suggestion.
Luldy Lab says, I have a question about the Alexa forums. Is this a place to ask? I mean, you can ask it. I don't know if we'll be able to answer, but go for it. Data-driven skills says, Robinson says, there are precise guidelines with violence in skills, or just a warning when launching the skill is enough. This seems like one you might have better insight than me.
I'm not sure about this one, just because I am not on the policy side of things.
Okay.
But yeah, that's a really good question.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know the specific guidelines on this, Robinson, but what my general recommendation is if you read through the Alexa certification guidelines, and if you look at each individual item and you can say, yep, we're good on that one. Yep, we're good on this one. If you can check all those boxes, you should be fine. I wouldn't have any worries about policy or anything else. But that being said, there are certainly exceptions. So I don't want to make you feel like you're bulletproof if you feel like you've accomplished all of those, because people can disagree. There's a lot of subjectivity in some of those. Data-driven skills says, can Amazon please update the Python documentation? There are so many JavaScript-only docs. Data-driven skills, this is something that we're working on. Our goal is to have code samples in all of our docs for Python and JavaScript specifically. And so we are working on that. But there are so many more people here working on JavaScript, and the population of developers is so heavily JavaScript that it's very hard to get enough resources to do all the Python stuff as fast. But it is coming, and we are working on it, I promise. And Python is an important piece of it. So we're not letting it go. We are working on it. We're adding to it all the time. But I understand your pain for sure. So Zella says, I so often use the Contact Us form, but when I get a response, I don't always know which ticket it's about. That's pretty interesting. I guess if you're using it frequently, that can be an issue. I have a similar issue with eBay. I have become a bit of a baseball card collector, Alicia, recently. And so there might be a day where I buy 4 or 5 different cards, and I will get a notification that says, hey, your card shipped. Okay. Which one? It's as if they wrote the use case like I would only buy one thing a day. And I know that I'm a little over the top, a little extreme in it, but it feels like they could be more informative. And actually, Amazon does this too. When you order something, when your order ships, they send you an email that says, hey, your order shipped. And they even show you like the transaction cost and stuff, but they don't actually tell you what the product was. I don't know if that's just to keep your email private or what, but at the bottom, they'll show recommended products that go with it. So you can kind of infer maybe what it might have been, but it's just weird to me that we do that. Okay, thanks. I wanted to paste a code snippet in a feature request, which was JSON. I couldn't get it to display properly, so the post is messed up. Oh, so there was no easy way to post code into the forums. I think that's what Luldy is getting after. Do you know, is there, in the forums, is there a way to post code easily?
I think that there is, although I don't know for sure, but I definitely seen people write in with code samples, and it's formatted in a way that's easily readable.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to try and go hyperspeed through the rest of these questions. Stephen Brown says, is there good free training resources for those that can't afford a lot of expense to train? I don't think you should have to spend much money to learn how to do Alexa stuff at all. One of the places I would recommend is just go to alexa.design/start. And that will take you to a lot of our tutorials and educational materials that we have out there. We're constantly working on new ones. So if you don't have your questions answered by the time you move through some of that stuff, reach out to us, use the Contact Us form, come to office hours. This is a free training resource right here. I'm happy to build demos and talk about stuff and help you work through problems. And as I did with one of the other folks on the channel, on the chat, I'll even set up meetings and walk you through some stuff if you need it. But there is a ton of stuff on our website. And you can get there by starting at alexa.design/start. Let's see. Andy Dews wants to know, can I change Alexa's name? Yes, you can change it to Computer or Echo or Amazon, and you do that in the Alexa app. But yes, you can totally do that. I also did a test with the yes intent and using a state slot in the NOU. If you use the value, okay, both pick up. Yes, but one of them is going to be the one that it does pick. So in that NOU evaluator, it will show you all of the ones it looked at, but it will show you at the top which one it picked. And that's the one that it will consistently go to. Delivery notifications on Alexa are also a little vague, probably for the best. Wouldn't want to ruin Christmas. Benjamin, I think you can actually set specific rules around that inside the Alexa app as to what you want those to be, specific or vague. But I know around the holidays, they overrode that and automatically made them vague. But I think by default, you can say, be specific. Tell me what is actually being delivered. Oxygen Box also recommends looking at, we have a tutorial called Cake Time and another one called Zero to Hero. These are things you can find on GitHub and on YouTube. I would recommend checking those out as well. Those are good, good starter kits. Thank you, Oxygen Box. All right, we are out of time. And it looks like user voice does support Markdown. So thank you guys all for tuning in today. Thank you, Alicia, for joining and sharing your insights. As always, this is a ton of fun for me. I get to share my knowledge and my experience with all of you, and I always learn a little bit from you as well. So we will be back here again next Tuesday. As a reminder, we have APL Power Hour tomorrow at this same time, noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific, on Twitch and YouTube. It's all about APL, so if you have any questions, that's a great place to dive in. On Thursday, we have another episode of Alexa and Friends. That's where I interview people that are working in the voice industry, both on the product team, executives at our company, as well as people outside. And that's at noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific. So please come and join us. We'd love to have you. And we'll see you at one of those places very soon. So again, for Alicia and I, thank you guys so much for tuning in, and we will see you all very soon.